So to adjust the nuts, we're going to file or sand the grooves a little bit deeper to lower the action. We want to have about 20 thousandths of an inch gap between the string and the nut. So when we press down, we're only pressing down 20 thousandths of an inch in order to make contact. Right now that is substantially thicker. It's probably up in the 40 thousandths range, and we want it to be around 20 thousandths. And the technique that I'm going to use to do that, I'm going to measure the difference in height from the fretboard to the top of the fret, and then I'm going to take that height, add 20 thousandths to it, put that amount of shims up here, and then file these slots down to the feeler gauge. That's how I'm going to control my height. So I'm going to put a fret rocker across the frets, and I'm going to take feeler gauges, and I am going to measure what the clearance is between the rocker and the board. And I've already set this one up and measured it. And this is 41 thousandths, and I'm just getting a nice feel right there. So these frets are 41 thousandths of an inch above the fretboard. Yours may be different. This is what mine happened to be. So that means that up here, I want 41 thousandths plus 20 thousandths. So I'm going to take these feeler gauges and I'm going to put them there, and I'm going to file down to this combined set of feeler gauges to get my string height. When we're filing down these grooves, there's a couple of things to pay attention to. The nut itself has these little grooves, all different size, for the different strings. Ideally, you want the string, which I showed in pink, to fit into a curved bottom that is the same diameter or same radius as the radius of the string, so that it has full contact on the bottom half of the circumference of the string and a little bit more clearance above it. That'll allow the string to sit nicely into the nut. The other thing we want to do is we want to angle the slot from the front of the nut to the back of the nut in an exaggerated way like this, because we want to assure that the vibration stops exactly at the front of the nut. So when we make our grooves, we want them sized to the individual strings, and we want them angled backwards. People that do this for a living and have all the fancy tools, there are sets of files that are sold in sets of 6 that have a different size file for each of the different strings, and you can get different files for different string sizes. They're about $80 from StewMac. They're beautiful files. They do a great job. But if you don't have $80 to spend on a set of files, I'll show you another way. So for the small E string, I'm going to use a file that has a diamond cross section and has a fairly sharp edge on it, and I'm going to use that to file the groove. For the other strings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the next smaller string and just wrap a piece of sandpaper around the string and use the sandpaper to sand my notch in the string. Each one that you work on, you'll want to loosen the string and take it out of your way. So I'm going to start on the high E string. So I'll loosen that, take it out of the way. I have my 61 thousandths slot. I will put that there. And I will start filing. Notice I'm at a bit of a downward angle. And I am going to file down until I just start touching the feeler gauge. Then I want to check still too high, so I didn't get down far enough. Put my feeler gauges back in, and I didn't get down to it, so I will continue filing. You know, the very first time that you do this, it's going to take a while because the nuts that are on these kits traditionally set the strings up fairly high to start with. But you want to make a guitar that has a nice playing action to it, so you want your strings to be lower. Okay, now I'm very close, so I am going to finish this off with just a little touch-up of sandpaper. And for this, I'm using 400 grit wet and dry sandpaper. I'm using it dry. And I'm just folding it around the string. I'm holding it at an angle. And I'm just finishing off. This way, the bottom of my groove will match the string a little bit better than what the file was doing. And now my string height is just about where I want it. Now when you're doing these, you want to take your time and do it slowly and not over-file it and get it too deep. But there is a real interesting recovery. If you do file it too deeply, you can take a little bit of blue painter's tape, put tape on either side of the nut, take baking soda, tap a little baking soda into the groove that is too deep, move it around a little bit, and then put a drop of super glue on the baking soda. And what that will do is that will fuse the baking soda onto the nut in that groove and build it up. Then you refile and get down to what you want to do. It works very well. It is basically invisible. You can probably find things on YouTube that explain it better than that, but that is a simple fix if you go too deeply. Now that I've got the first one, for the next one, I'm just going to detune the string so that I can take it out of the way easily. I'm going to use my smallest string, and I'm going to wrap sandpaper around it. I'm going to get my set of feeler gauges together. And I am going to sand down until that string bottoms out. And then I'll have the correct groove diameter, the correct angle, and the correct string height. You have to be patient. It takes a while. On these nuts, you're sanding down a fairly significant distance, but you'll end up with a nut that is correctly set up for the guitar that you're working on. And you'll do that for each string until you have a uniform 20 thousandths gap between your string and the first fret.